line. I'm going to set the recording up now.
Got it.
We'll also have a chat line. Now, the way Charlene's going to present is she's going to go through her PowerPoint, and then we're going to leave a bunch of time at the end so we can do questions and answers and address the chat line. ARMA New England's very own Yusra Khan will be going through those chat line pieces. So about Charlene.
He doesn't know me at all.
Charlene's been a member of ARMA New England chapter for many years. She's served on the board as a volunteer. She has degrees from Harvard University, Simmons. She has several professional certifications, IGP, CRM, PMP, and CIP. She's had a long career, and I don't want to age you or anything.
Can't age me any more than I've aged myself, so go right ahead.
In many different fields. She's currently serving as the Director of IG and Data Security at AccuFile Incorporated. She does consulting with corporate clients, records information, policies, retention schedules, WISPs, things of that nature. I think a lot of people on this call know Charlene, and for those that don't, we'll have a fine introduction to her with her presentation.
Anyway, thank you all for coming. I always enjoy speaking to you. It was great to see the list of folks because I know most of you, met most of you, or spoken in front of or with you at some point in time, or have listened to you as a speaker. And it is always good to share information back and forth with my fellow professionals and those who I like to think of as fellow people passionate about records and information management. I think oddly passionate, maybe also the way we put it, but we're there. And one of the things that's been on my mind the last year or two is our involvement in information security and the policies that buttress that, our organizational policies and how we should be involved and can be involved and kind of work our way to the table of involvement with security and compliance being as important as it is right now and as risky to our organizations as some of the information policies are, how we can help make that happen. So see if I can get my page downs to go here. It may not be quite so easy. Apparently I am going to have to do something different. All right. Sorry if I'm going too fast and back and forth. So why do we care? We care because of our role. We are supporting our own organization's records and information management goals. That's what they hired us to do. That's what we ought to do. That's what our primary goal is. However, there's more to it involving the information environment of our organizations. And I believe as professionals, we have to make a commitment to this structure of the information environment in our own organizations to help promote a coherent view of dealing with our information management and how to protect ourselves, our organizations, and people outside our organizations. And I see that as we're all in it together mentality. So even though we don't always feel a bit on the sidelines, we are part of this, and we need to take our area of expertise and use it to help mold more of the view of the organization on how we set up information security and compliance, how we train on it, how we make other people aware of it. And we are all in it together so that we all have jobs in the morning and our organization doesn't have a risk or financial problem. So in some ways, it's the CYA. We are people who know about defensible actions. We talk all the time in our field about defensible anything, but for the organization, information security and compliance, not only is it essential, but the way we go about it needs to be defensible in a court of law, to our peers, to anyone else who feels that it's important. So who's in charge of this? Obviously, we're not. Generally, I don't know if anybody can raise their hand if they're in charge of it all, but generally we're not. We're part of highly structured organizations for the most part, the people I know. There are those of us who are not, who are the solo, but we can often find out who's in charge by looking at organizations that have information governance set up already. And that is generally a more sophisticated structured organization and less a single person department organization. I've been in all of those and I know how it feels in every level of size of an organization. The leading indicators to me are if they're sophisticated enough to have an information governance committee, that's who's in charge. Sometimes they're sophisticated enough to have a chief information security officer. That person may be in charge. Or it may be unknown. It could be an IT director or a director of administration that by default, that's the person with some authority who spends some time worrying about policies and procedures within the organization. But generally the popular type are structured with structured roles. And we hope that these mean that we have collaborative workplaces, because those are the most predisposed to having success in policy efforts, to being able to get people together in a room or virtually in a room to discuss and improve our efforts for our organization to have a strong information management environment, information security environment, information privacy environment. All of those work together. And we as information professionals in records and information management and governance, we do have those skills. We may not realize it, but we do have those skills, and we get listened to if we are able to reach the right people. So we are required, for the most part, not to be in charge. We are required to be a collaborative grown-up in the room. And we can try not to compete with our peers in IT or legal or compliance or HR. If those people are self-appointed or appointed by the organization to be in charge of an effort to ensure information security and privacy, well, we're there to help. We don't have to be in charge. We can step up if that is the need, but we are there to collaborate and to bring our expertise. This is a very long list of policies that touch on information security. I am incredibly fond of talking about written information security policies because I live in Massachusetts, and every organization in Massachusetts is required to have a written information security policy. This allows an organization to put it in writing for everybody to know whose roles and responsibilities, what is expected of them, what has to be contained, what has to be shared. I will go on and speak a little bit more about that later, but you all know acceptable use or acceptable computer use policies. We all have to look at them and sign them. If your organization doesn't have one, then that is something that you need to bring to the attention of IT immediately. If it's not reviewed regularly, again, very important piece of information management. Bring your own device has become in the forefront during all of these remote workplace days. We want to make sure that bring your own device, or BYOD, is extended to a whole lot more areas as well as we work remotely. We are often included in IT policy development. That's great. I have been, and I always appreciate being asked what my opinion is, and I often am able to help improve IT policies. If you aren't included, you might want to get to know those IT people who work on policies and offer your expertise, or download them, take a look at them, edit them, and say, you know, is it time for an annual review? I think you missed something. Risk mitigation. If we spend a lot of time worrying about risk, let's do some risk mitigation reviews of our policies, of our actions. So the remote work policy, everybody ought to have one by now. If not, you're behind the times. And it needs to be very clear and needs to be followed. And oftentimes RIM ends up in the middle of this because remote work policies have a lot to do with the management of information offsite. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as physical environment protections offsite. We all talk about defensible destruction. This is a huge part of litigation. Our legal departments worry a lot about the fact that we destroy things because they have to worry about the requirements to hold on to material that is subject to legal hold. And we can be a big part of that as well. One thing that seems to be missed a lot is our code of conduct that comes probably the first thing you get when you start at a place is they hand you the code of conduct and say, this is what you need to know and sign off on. And believe it or not, we can actually have a little bit to do with that as well. The records management policy, records retention schedule, development and review, all of these things are part that we have. If we know that our policies and procedures are up to date, we can be a model for policy development and for people following policy. And then one thing that has come up a great deal lately is third-party information vendor contract risk reviews. So there's a lot of outsourcing that goes on, a lot of third-party vendors that have access to our information. And this is a big leaky point that we need to be part of deciding how to fix. And we will go on to do that. So again, first thing we see is code of conduct. And the reason I like this a lot is because it's the first thing that every new hire sees. And they kind of glaze over after the second or third policy reading. But the code of conduct, which one of my organizations allowed us to put in, I think, 2 lines about the requirements for every staff member to consider themselves a records owner, that to me was wonderful. It made sure that every person right up front knows that the responsibility for them as a record owner, not in detail, just that they were going to have to be the owner of that information, and that that person would be responsible for whatever happens with that information that they are the designated record owner for. So as we all know, that these records back up all the actions that are taken by the individual organization, and this is essential for the organization to stay safe. So I would love for each of you to go back and look at your code of conduct. I'm sure someone in HR can point you to it if you don't even have to take it as an annual review, which you should. And I would suggest that you could lobby to include a sentence in that standard training, because through the standard training, the organization helps to protect itself and others with good information and records policies. Pretty simple, but not something that's often included in the code of conduct, and I think should be. I hope you agree. So the information privacy written information security policy, the WISP, is, as I mentioned before, it's required by my state. It's also required by California, Colorado, Virginia. Connecticut has something either coming, or I'll have to double check with Susan. I believe there's several other states that have things in their state legislatures. And this is something we all need to consider if we have an office in that location. And that may be that you do or that you don't, but whichever, if you have one office in one state, you still need to worry about this. And it is often very easy to just look at the regulation for your state and just follow that pattern to say what you're going to do. And one of the biggest parts of it is to make sure people know what their obligation or their responsibility is, their role or responsibility. And that could be that you are part of a group that helps the designated person to take care of all of the actions that would occur in the event of a data breach. So the written information security plans and policies are often because the state is now requiring us to have a plan in place should there be a breach. And it often will keep us from heavier fines or future litigation if we followed the plan that we've put into place. It needs a responsible party, the designated information security person, and that person will have to know quickly how to take action in the event of a data breach. Because as we hear in almost every webinar, it's not a matter of when, it's a matter of when and when and when. It's just going to happen. You're going to see a small or large data breach, and you need to know your obligations under every scenario. Your organization needs to know its obligations if one person's personal health information is released, or if an entire database full of banking numbers is released. What are your obligations? What are those requirements for your state? How do you keep your reputation? How do you manage contacting the people at risk? A lot of this should be written, and the people in an information governance committee or an information technology committee should know who does what when and what the follow-up actions are. So these can get as complicated as you want them to be, but I would encourage every organization to have a written information security plan, which is that overarching view of what happens when a breach occurs or is suspected. It doesn't even have to be a proven breach. It can be a suspected breach or a reported breach. There are different levels of this. So please read your local codes and react accordingly. So we also early in our time at an organization are handed an acceptable use policy. And this should change regularly because the devices, the media, the social media we use, it changes fairly often. There are new inventions. I don't see anything talking about AI yet, but maybe sometime there will be that. What is allowed in your organization, what is used for. Right now, a lot of acceptable use is on your computer device use. Back in the old days, back in the way old days, it was, you can't look at porn, you can't run movies. It was a lot about inappropriate images or text. It was also about massive use of computer resources in the days where we didn't have those capabilities to have everybody looking at movies at the same time or listening to audio files at the same time. Those issues have kind of eased a bit, but we still have acceptable use issues in that there are things that we want people to use our devices for, and there are things we do not want people to use our devices for. So the rules need to be very clear in any organization, what's acceptable, what isn't. Right now, we're also hearing a little bit more about TikTok, for instance. We're hearing, government organizations are banning TikTok. Okay, great. So is that in their policy? Has that been added to their new hires, their new hire information? Is it something IT has control over? There's a lot of questions when somebody just outright bans, you can't use Instagram at your place. You can't use TikTok at your place. You can't use WhatsApp at your place. Whatever it is that you're going to pick on. That's important. And so if you haven't kept up, it's time to review. And it doesn't have to wait for an annual review. When you hear something in the news like a TikTok ban, ask around. Is that something we were going to ban? Is that something we worry about? What level of worry should we have for the applications on our devices? And then also, what devices? Can you use your own phone? It seems to me there's a whole lot of people that use their own phone for both their personal and their business use. That's obviously easier for everybody. It's cheaper for everybody. But I was old-fashioned enough in my last world to want two separate devices, because as a records manager, I knew that they would own the device that had any information on it that was related to the organization. And if I just mistakenly had somebody had contacted me on my personal email and they could justify that they would take my device or scan my device, I didn't want that. So I liked to keep my personal and my business use separate. That has been updated somewhat because there's the ability to separate out those two universes. But I think legally, you still have written away your rights to your information on your device if you share it with another. So just be aware of what the technical details are in your organization. So again, varies according to the organizations, but there ought to be rules. And the rules for your organization and the rules for the greater world, have you been keeping up? I'm not sure. I try, but I feel like I spend a lot of my days reading and watching webinars and talking to peers and listening to different kinds of things about these things involving devices, involving apps. And there are days that my head just spins because I can't keep up. And just having fun with Chat GPT, okay, this could be really interesting over the next few years in our workplaces. So I would encourage that there are written policies regarding a lot of this. One thing that comes up all the time when I help write policies is, do you have a policy about the secure transfer of files? Now, admittedly, I work mainly with law firms, banks, people who really care about this, but what are your IT rules on secure transfer of files and information? Who has written these policies? Are they up to date? I think I read a policy recently where I asked the IT director, are you still doing it using this transfer protocol? I said, oh, no, we did this instead. It's like, well, then you need to change your policy. You need to follow your policies. You need to change them when you change your technology. The rules on detachable devices, backwards and forwards. I know a lot of desktops were latched down so that people could not share files. But then came COVID and people working from home, and detachable devices became somewhat more of a norm when people went to home computers or brought computers home. We still have to have rules that regard what's on it and who owns it and what happens to it at the end of its retention. We need to make sure that everyone understands that copies of things on detachable devices still belong to the organization, still have a retention time period set, and must be treated accordingly. That with downloading, that with email. So downloading is something that we all have done. It just makes our lives easier. It sometimes handing off something. I heard recently with one of my clients that with everyone going at home, they actually had people who were putting information on thumb drives, and the thumb drives are being FedExed back to the office for someone else to do some other action. I don't want to get into details. And I'm just thinking, this cannot be happening right now, but it is. So you got to make rules around it if that's the way they want to do it and they insist on continuing. We all use cloud storage. Some of us use it for actual retention. Some of us, just use it for convenience. Some of us use it for sharing of information with other parties because that's how we can all work on the same files. Whatever the use of cloud is that's acceptable in your organization, please write a policy regarding it. It can be part of an acceptable use policy. It can be its own policy. I have seen it both. It depends on how clear someone wants to make it, that it's a important, policy, cloud use. It's great. Do it, whatever works for your organization, just do it. And then we have personal email policies as well as corporate email policies. So the corporate email policies we should already have written up in our records management policy. But if there needs to be a reminder, and often IT will agree there needs to be a reminder, how much personal email can you do on the organization's devices or using the organization's email system? Let's spell it out. And how long is it kept? And who retains it? And who owns it? All of these things are important to put in very clear language. So the remote work policy, we know the device use at home differs greatly from in office. It just has to. It's not linked that same nice, easy, everybody comes in, it's all on the same Wi-Fi or non-Wi-Fi connection. But in my last environment, we didn't have assigned desks or offices anymore. So we had very clear policies about where information went, what got locked up, whether anything could be left in public, and the answer was nothing. But at home, a lot of people went home and started working in a home office that was not set up for the same expectations as a work office. And there's papers everywhere, there's stuff in the wastebasket, there's no file drawers, there's no shredder, and there's work related material there when family comes and goes, or even God forbid clients come and go, or other people who should not be in our home offices. And those expectations about clean desk, about locked office, about file drawers being locked at the end of the day, and information not shared, volumes of phone calls not shared, lots of these things should be put into writing and trained on, so that everyone understands the organizational expectations when it comes to information that is kept and used in a home office. A reminder from records managers all the time that long-term storage is a responsibility of the organization, and the original is owned by the organization, not an individual. And individuals, and in my case, individuals are often lawyers who own everything and never want to let any of it go. It has to be reiterated more than once that there is a piece of information that is the original record, that is the real piece that we are going to keep, and nothing else is the record. and extras and copies and printouts and much more should not be kept by the individual in any format other than what is deemed to be the record by the organization for long-term storage. And that's where I think that RIM can be very useful, because we can go in and think about this and bring it to IT's attention and say, we're missing this piece. We're not reminding them that they're downloading onto their local desktop. They're keeping their email in a place that is not approved. They are hanging on to things for longer than the retention, or in a place that is not secure. So these are our strengths. These are the things we've built our reputations around, is how to enhance the organization's risk management and security by having this structure of records and information management, of information governance in the organization. And the quick turn to large amounts of offsite work has brought us kind of quickly to the realization that it's not well controlled. So we need to keep setting expectations and reiterating expectations. I think we're good at that. And then, of course, we get into our own world, the records management policy. We can't go around telling everybody else that they need to do things better if we haven't. So you've got control of the records management policy. This can be as comprehensive or as light as you feel it should be in light of all of the organization's policies. But I personally feel that the records management policy can be more inclusive of other information policies and expectations, that we can reiterate what is expected in records management that may overlap a bit with acceptable use or litigation related matters. We can be clear about the role of each person as a records manager in our own environment. So please lead by example and be the role model that I know you all are. And that leads to the records and retention schedule development and review. As we know, it's an essential part of records policy management. In fact, in a lot of organizations, the records retention schedule is considered a policy and helps the organization secure information to itself, secure and protect. We should be very clear about the sensitivity information, how we should be reviewing information for elements that should not be in the permanent storage. Many of us are now looking at old information and saying, wait a minute, we have to find a way to redact or remove things like bank account numbers or social security numbers or a million other things that come to mind, any personal health information. That's going to take time as we go through and review how we stored things. But electronic storage often allows us to review this using IT tools to remove that kind of information. So let's keep remembering that policies should evolve as our abilities evolve as well. And one of the things that most internal audit groups would require is an annual review of any policy. And this doesn't have to be, exhausting for you. You probably have people that would be good designees to say, would you take a look at this records policy? Tell me, does it make sense? Is this something you can understand? Is this something you could follow? And if not, tell me what I'm missing, or tell me what is something that cannot be done. So you might want to consider looking outside the records and information management department for annual review. And often internal audit will give you a lot of that. They will be looking for specific things like, did you do what you were told to do? Are your controls being met? And they will do that bit. But you may want a little bit more of a textual look where somebody looks and says, no, this language doesn't make sense. I don't know what you promised here. I don't know what you're planning to do here. I don't know what my role is here. So in the ideal IG world, there is an IG committee. There is a group of people who are dedicated to worrying about information governance, security, and risk. There's the ability, when you have a policy, to create and include governance from others, not just within your own department, although that could be essential, but to have the overarching IG committee for final review and approval of your policies and your records retention schedule. But I would advise in an organization that's more than a one-person record shop to have committees in a couple layers of involvement, where the IG committee would be the ultimate approver that has business recognition that is top level executives, but there's another layer, a working group, a record steward group, a records partner, people who actually know the records, who can help you review the policy and also the records retention schedule. As you know, that's really important. But we are responsible for this one, and we need to make it as good as we can make it. So representation from all functional areas and business units is part of the policy that helps the organization stay private and secure. We have that responsibility. One thing we all do is we worry a little bit about legal holds. And so we worry a little bit about defensible destruction, because as you bring things for approval for destruction, often you're stopped short. And for those that have not gotten to the trust level with the departments of being able to destroy at the end of retention without approval, we have a little bit of an extra problem. But litigation holds are right in our purview. The legal department's in charge of it, but RIM is often a large participant on these legal hold letters and instructions. We need to be part of the distribution of legal hold letters. We need to be part of the actual creation of instructions for people of how to do these things, how to hold on your email, how to hold in paper, how to hold what's in your files, how to organize a little bit better online for what has to be held. And so we need to offer to help. We can offer this to legal or compliance. And a lot of times, internal audit is one of the important parts of litigation holds and defensible destruction. And if you have the access to an internal audit group, they can be very helpful. That's their mindset. And we should lean on them and get to know them a lot better. We can help with pre-organization of material that we think is going to someday be subject to a legal hold. In the pharma world, for instance, we were pretty sure about product information and quality information as being a likely source of litigation. So they were handled very carefully. Having teams that gather and review litigation hold info. This might be somebody's particular duty. It might be more than one person. There might be an IT partner and a RIM partner. But this policy is very important, and the execution of it is very important. And we can also offer assistance with the online repositories, work with IT on the hold, and more essential, what happens when we return to normal at hold release. And I think that's kind of important for all of us to recognize that at the time of release, there's more duty, and it needs to be happening at the speed of sound. As soon as you hear about it, we need to go back to destruction. We need to go back to releasing and putting things in their proper places for long-term storage if that's the requirement. But if we don't, we are not in compliance with our own policies, which is in itself a risk. So one other thing that has often been overlooked that seems to be coming up a lot in my life is the third-party information vendor risk. So we review these parties. We review the people that are coming to us as contractors, as vendors. And I think RIM's role is very underused here. We know when we look at a contract, what could possibly be an issue long-term for that information that this party has access to. There have been a lot of stories about breaches happening with third parties. And it's not just, cloud storage or an IT contractor. There's a lot of people in the middle as well that have often got access to things that you don't even remember, real estate issues. And what else has come to mind that's actually come up before? Several of these types of things, people who do our transportation of our materials and goods. We need to be very, very careful, and as an organization, that we have policies regarding vendor risk review. And it does protect the organization in a major way, defines the roles and responsibilities, find out more about vendor capabilities, protections, also things like how are they guaranteeing, ensuring, how are they be part of an information breach response, and what would their obligations or requirements be? Also, do they have an obligation to pay us back if we get fined for breaches? That's part of a contract that we need to look at. And always, 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 we need to be looking to see what they do have access to, under what circumstances, what rules apply. We don't make our own IT department, everybody in it, given access to everything that's in the IT. We're definitely escalating as they need access. And yet there are times where the vendors have total access to this information. And we need to be very careful about who has it, what it is they have access to, and what we can hold potentially more securely outside of a third party. Not everything needs to go to the cloud. Not everything needs to be handled by a third party. So you can limit your financial or reputational risk by writing your policies and reviewing those contracts that come in from those folks. So I'd like to encourage you to audit your program regularly. You can work with your internal audit group or do a self-audit. I found that before I could ever get somebody to do an audit officially for me, I had to do a couple rounds of what would it look like? What would I say? And our programs often are auditable by numbers, like how much did this do and how much did that do? How many files did we destroy? But what about auditing to make sure our policies are defensible? Why isn't that done more often? We need to have some expert or someone with, strong opinions. Occasionally you might have somebody that, would just look this over, a quality control person, somebody who could say, your policy doesn't cover that. Why not? And this is something that you're missing. We find that regular interaction with these groups like legal, compliance, IT, and any other governance related groups are really important in order to have a seat at this table. And you don't have to nag constantly, but you do have to be someone that is trustworthy, that is always there to help, that has potentially a strong position, but not an obnoxious position, to interact with our peers and help them realize that our areas of expertise are compatible with theirs, that we could add a strength to these groups that may or may not have thought about it. And one of the examples I'm really interested in seeing more of is I'm finding more of my peers have moved into legal and compliance positions, which is really interesting. They become legal operations people because we in our organizations are working to support the structure that keeps our companies, our governments, our firms compliant but secure, and also risk averse for the kinds of things that ruin our reputation. We do not want to be known as the people who had a breach that revealed personal health information for all our employees or the bank accounts of all of our clients. That would not be wise. So let's collaborate. There are people that we automatically come to mind. Hopefully there's an information security person. Hopefully there's, a head of HR, IT. We want a coordinated review of policies, not policies. We can get that done by working one-on-one or in a group, if there's a committee, to review policies with an eye to coordinated language, the same level of authority or what am I trying to say here? We want to make sure we emphasize the important things without overemphasizing the things that are not as important. And we don't want to be crying wolf all the time. We need consistency. We want to clarify those expectations and what happens if people do not comply, because you remember people are our biggest weakness. If there's going to be a breach, you can often put it right down to a person. And that we need to be more clear about our policies regarding people, their access, and what their actions should be. I think Lewis is on our call, and he would tell you use clear adult language. Don't talk down to people. Don't bully or act like a parent. present a unified message, make comprehensive review, something that you do, but you do it in stages. You don't have to bite it all off at once. I am a big fan of continuous improvement. You can't do this all at once. So start at home, work your way around. We got long careers, right? We can do this. And once you've done something that has helped the organization, please, please, please indulge in ruthless self-promotion. Go ahead and tell people, we think this is a good thing. We believe it's helping the organization. We think so-and-so's report proves that this is something that people care about. We've realized that we've contributed to the written information security plan, which will keep the organization safe. So get that executive report, write a change management plan, get the right people there. Make sure you're part of action teams like an incident response team for a written information security breach. Create a list of policies to infect with RIM principles. Start with something easy, go with something old, go with something least reviewed, but start and get it done. So you've got your strategic plans in place. Things should be easy. Let's make sure we're part in the next stage of our information governance world in our organizations that we start after policies with plans. And I know you all are capable of doing this. And those are some of the ideas that I would advise you to take to impact the ongoing security and privacy rules for your organization. Thank you. The slides will be available. I believe there'll be an email that will be sent out.
Okay. That's true.
Yep.
Charlene, anybody else hear me? No?
Yep.
Okay.
Think we can hear you.
Okay, great. So Charlene, thank you for the presentation. Slides will be available. And if anybody wants to contact Charlene with any questions, she has her email listed here.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the recording will be made available as well. We'll get that out. Please visit ARMA New England website and see our upcoming events. Also, we're always looking for new members, and we're always searching around for board members as well. But
Always the call for workers.
the continuous call for all chapters. It'd be good to increase our membership and help out with the management of that as well. But Charlene, that was a great job.
Thanks. Can I point out one of the chat room entries was from Todd Chernikoff, and I really appreciate this. He says, our RIM program just went through an internal audit exam. That's always a good thing, even though it's painful. And he has a main lesson learned to share, keeping your processes tight and documented. Absolutely. This is part of it. Not just your policies, but your processes and procedures. We could have gone on for hours if we're going to talk about processes and procedures, but absolutely close feedback loops, ensure your requests for feedback are answered. Thank you, Todd. That was great to have that. Maybe Todd should be writing one about processes and procedures to follow up from this one, because it's a really good topic, and it's relevant to all of us. So thank you all very much for your time and attention. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at an in-person meeting sometime. That would be awesome.
So, any other questions, any other comments?
I think you're unmuted if anybody wants to say anything.
Yeah, I had a question, Charlene. It's Lewis.
Yes. Hey, Lewis.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. I love the breadth of areas that you cover. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts. It seems to me that with the speed of change of technology, what used to maybe be a reasonable 5-year review cycle for some of our stuff is now too long. And I'm wondering if you generally, do you recommend, it's hard to think like everything's changing every 3 months, but we can't possibly review. What do you think? How do you
Lewis, wouldn't it be great if the budgets changed as fast? Wouldn't it be great? Because, we all are understaffed and under-resourced. And I absolutely would agree that if we had the support, we could do so much more. We could apply our talents to so many more areas, including a more constant review, because 5 years can be a long time in current data history. It can be a really long time. And rules that were relevant 5 years ago have been blown out the window. We've had to change things quickly. And I feel for my IT counterparts on this as well. Sometimes we have a little clash with IT, but boy, my heart goes out to them. I don't know how anybody can keep up with the speed of change and expectations. But
So
our too.
if resourcing weren't an issue, if you said whatever we decide, we will resource, do you have a sense for how long that delay should be? 2 years, 4 years, 6 years?
You know, I used to say 3 because practically you have a whole lot of other stuff going on.
Mhm.
And, it depends on your organization. I was just working with a town and their review cycle isn't all that, isn't all that recent because of COVID too. Just remember, we just all went through where nothing got done.
Mhm.
So if you start saying, every year, people are already in a backlog. So I wish I could say you must, but I don't have that power. Every organization has its own problems for that. But I agree with you that if you can push it to as often as possible, that would be best. And that would require that you also look at your records retention schedule every year and your policy every year, which you should be doing anyway, and try to nudge it along with your committee. They're the people. There's Arlette saying 2 to 3 years for corporate policies. Yeah, I like annual. Honestly, there's some I really, really think should be required annual training. And I think those of us that have been in highly regulated industries, we're forced. But we also have systems that allow us to, take this training and review it and record it. So corporate policies, 2 to 3 years, Arlette, I would agree. That's good. And again, like Lewis said, boy, things change. I keep saying the TikTok example because I'm laughing as everyone tries to respond fast enough. And I'm thinking, nobody's rewriting these policies fast enough for their decision makers. And, it just, I don't know. I wish I wish you all the best. Is all I can say. As often as you can make happen. Anyone else have anything they want to jump in and add? Because that's quite a discussion
I'll say
for us.
that currently we are reviewing our schedule and our policy annually, and we, as of last year, instituted annual required written training.
Yeah.
And we're a financial institution with about 22,000 employees.
Yes, you should be. I mean, financial institutions have almost no alternative but to stay up with it. And same with law firms. I mean, they're under pretty strict guidelines about what everybody should know and how they should act. So these highly regulated industries, they're working overtime at catching people up in pharma, in banking, in nuclear, in many of these, because they have to. It's to keep themselves safe and out of the news. But even if you're in a smaller organization, there are things that have changed since the last time you ran around that. And maybe you can ask someone else to help you review your policies. Maybe it's not even inside your own group, because an outside look, it's nice to include somebody in trying to understand what you're doing, and it gives a new perspective.
All departments are asked. They get feedback every year.
Yeah, great. That's the ideal. And then Chris is saying that he's an internal audit fail in Europe, as folks who were interviewed couldn't point to our retention schedule, even though it's part of annual training. Oh, welcome to the real world, huh? Yes, we can't make them care. I think that is a real problem. All we can do is say we presented it, we required it, we had them sign off on it, and then it's not records fault. It's the individuals and their managers' fault. So, try to at least put it on to someone else at that point. You tried. Any other folks have any insight how we should continue? All right, well, if that's it, I am perfectly content to let you go and get 3 minutes back of your day. But thank you all for being here. It's been fun. It always is fun to present to a group of like-minded individuals, and I enjoy catching up with all of you. So hope to see you soon.
Thanks again. In person next time, right?
I hope. Take care. Thank you all.